Hop on with us as we dive into the latest topics, share some laughs, and bring you insightful conversations in and around the realm of ag. From down-home wisdom to cutting-edge tech, we've got what you need to fuel your curiosity. So tune in, relax, and let's kick back. On the Tailgate, presented by Wade Incorporated.
Welcome back to another episode on The Tailgate. I'm your host, Cade Moody. I got Gaston Line here with me again, and our producer, Riggs Ware. And got Robert Loper on the Tailgate with us today, who is Wade Incorporated, our IntelliFarm Division's lead agronomist. And we're going to talk a little bit about lawn and garden today.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on with us this morning.
Sure.
So, Robert, I want to talk
here.
a little bit about what is your full-time gig? I know we're going to focus a little bit on lawn and garden today, but what do you do for what's your everyday
for the
look like?
last basically 11 years, been here as the precision ag agronomist. Basically, we focus on strictly agronomy that is mixed with the technology, using what people have in their arsenal that they are purchasing from Deere already, be it variable rate seeding. We do variable rate nitrogen. We do a lot of soil sampling, tissue sampling, and we can offer a full consulting kind of a program with where we're checking insects, weeds, the whole bit.
And I guess reporting back to us, what you're seeing out in the field, different stages of crops and what you're seeing out there, to be
That's
on
right.
the lookout for. So
Sure.
Yeah, helping us utilize all that technology for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think based on you got some cool stuff that you've done that you're doing with customers, I think we'll probably have a full episode to focus on your full-time agronomy role
Sure.
with Wade Incorporated. But today we do want to talk about the farm in the backyard. We want to discuss, there's some people out there, me being one of them. I want a good-looking yard. I attempt a garden every year. I want a good-looking landscape, but I really don't want to spend a lot of money. So we're trying to get some tips from you today on how to do that. And I think, so tell us a little bit about, because you got a good-looking setup at your house.
Yeah, over the years, I guess it started being a chemical consultant over the years, just spraying our own yards, the group of us, and then it transitioned into helping some of our growers, our farmers, with recommendations in their yards, and then it went to their friends and other friends that we just would help and go by and look at it and tell them what they need to spray, that kind of thing, and gardens as well, because we always grew a garden back there, and so it became one of my passions that I like to, I enjoy landscaping. I enjoy trying to make my yard look good. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes it doesn't succeed, always with things I do. And landscaping and gardening. I mean, we've always done that, and we enjoy doing that at home.
I feel like there's a bit of a pride factor as well too. You're in that role.
Oh, yeah.
You're the agronomist. You know the stuff. You gotta.
Yeah, you want to. You don't want going out there representing the agronomy community and having a bad looking yard or a real grown up weedy garden.
So, well, all right. So your yard. So you live Lake Washington area.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you got mainly Bermuda?
Yes, it's all Bermuda. It's mostly hybrid Bermuda. I do have one section of my yard that is common Bermuda. It was that way when we bought the house, and I have not changed it. I manage them kind of the same to try to, get them the same color and get them real close. But I mostly have hybrid Bermuda in my yard.
Well, can you talk about the effects that our our growing conditions, our environment around here in the Delta and in the hills, I think it's frustrating at times for somebody that's working in their yard or even their garden that you can do all the right things and then, the climate is a big factor and can change what has worked in the past. So it's frustrating for me at times.
It's kind of the adage of, every action has a reaction. And everything you do in your yard has a reaction to what you've done, being, fertilization, irrigation, or rainfall, especially this time of year. How you're managing it as far as height of your grass, thatch, are you mulching? Are you bagging? Are you just leaving the clippings, blowing around? That kind of thing. All have effects on what's going to happen. So, for instance, in my yard, I fertilize pretty heavily, certainly not over what's recommended for a hybrid Bermuda yard, but I'm in that range of the on the high end, and so I have to deal with if we get cool, wet conditions, I'll have to deal with fungus, being Rhizoctonia or rust or one of those. Hybrid Bermuda is susceptible to both of those. There are newer varieties that have better tolerance, but mine is one of the older varieties. So, common Bermuda, you don't have those problems as much. You will get rhizoc, but not so much rust. It has good rust resistance. So all of those things, so in managing, kind of intensely managing your lawn, with fertilization, if you have irrigation, you have to watch for fungus events that are going to happen at certain times of the year when it stresses. Sometimes in the spring when we get a big, now cool, wet conditions that stay cool and wet for a little while. On in the summer, it could be hot and dry, even though you're irrigating, you could still get a rust. So, a good program of, the fertilizer regimen that you're doing, but along with fungicide applications that are, recommended a couple of times a year usually.
So back to I want to talk a little bit more about fertilizer because I'm thinking I got a yard slap full of common Bermuda, except for the portion up against my neighbor. I got a little hybrid Bermuda coming in. What it's let's say it's late April, early May. Bermuda's coming out, pretty strong right about now. What fertilizer do I need to be considering, and then what do I need to stay away from?
There are multiple ways to skin the cat, so to speak, as far as fertilization. But what I like early, I like to put an ammonium sulfate shot out, just to get a good deep green. If it does not come out as green and dark as I want it to, as I've done my scalp in the springtime, which I don't do. Some people who use reel mowers or that kind of thing, they'll scalp down, to
real low, yeah,
half an inch or 5/8 maybe or half. I don't go down that low. Obviously, I'm mowing with a regular John Deere. I have a X590.
Better be a John Deere.
Oh yeah, I've always had John Deere.
You'll be off the podcast.
Even before I worked at Wade. So when I do my scalp, I will leave my grass if I can, if I don't have too much thatch. So that all goes back to the program of what you're trying to do and what you're needing to do from year to year. Some years I don't have to remove that because it's deteriorated enough. And there's fertilizer.
It'll
there.
help you out. Right?
Oh, there's fertilizer there. So that's another thing when you talk about fertilizer. Are you sweeping or removing your grass clippings just in the springtime? Every time you mow, what exactly is your program? So that's going to determine, too, how much potential fertilizer, and it takes it about a year to break down to get it, but how much potential fertilizer are you removing? And so you've got to factor that in. So it would be like in corn, if you're doing seed corn or if you're doing harvesting for forage, if you're taking
that out.
You're taking that much away, so you've got to put that back.
Right.
So that's not factored in, so it's factored one way or the other what you need to do. So this year I did take my clippings off because they had not deteriorated enough in the winter. So I had so many clippings I swept. I have the little sweeper, pull behind sweeper, and took those off. So I have to adjust, in my mind, adjust my fertilizer program a little bit. Now, nitrogen, as it breaks down, you're going to use a lot of it in that what breaks down in season. Otherwise, the nitrogen is going to be gone. So I don't factor that one way or another. This year, my grass has got a really good color to it because it was a milder winter as a whole. So I had a little bit more nitrogen that did not leach or break down, that is breaking down now. So it's got a good color. So I will go with a little bit less ammonium sulfate. But then after the ammonium sulfate, I like a turf fertilizer. Some people will triple 13 4 times, 5 times, whatever, to get the right number of pounds of each element that they're looking for. I use a 32-210 with a 50% slow release. Some people use a 25% slow release or a 30. It all depends on if you have irrigation or if you don't have irrigation.
Right. What about soil sampling? You do a
I was
little
about
soil
to say
sampling?
that.
I do.
'Cause I feel like that's overlooked. a lot
Yeah,
of
the
places.
importance of the pH.
Yeah, when you talk about a soil sample, it's a roadmap. And so you know where you are and you know where you want to go. And the soil sample will help you get there. Otherwise, you're just kind of blindly making a shotgun approach. Well, I'm going to put some P and K out. The nitrogen not a factor there, but I'm going to put this much P and this much K, and well, I'm going to hope for the best. What is my pH? Is my pH? Bermuda grass especially does not mind a little bit lower pH, but that gets into a whole different conversation about what you're looking at as far as your P and K that is there. When your pH gets one way or another kind of out of whack, then the P and K gets tied up, which are the two main elements. I mean, you've got some, and we'll get into talking about micronutrients. That's the other thing with these turf fertilizers that I like, that they have iron in them, which iron is great for dark green color. They have some copper, and they have a little bit of sulfur. And they have some other things too, but there's some minor elements that you can, especially when you start micromanaging things, that you can get a little bit out of whack that you need for that. But yes, having a soil sample to know where you are with all those elements is to me, is very important. I mean, even if you don't do it, I mean, you're not talking about much money, but once every 2 to 3 years.
Where can somebody get a soil sample? I mean, is there kits online or something?
Yeah, there are. Obviously, I couldn't get around to everybody, but we can come pull them, and I do pull them in some people's yards. I did some for Parker Barrett this winter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they moved to a new home, and he wants to get his yard where it wants.
That was another thing. Y'all seem like y'all have y'all's grass pretty much well intact of 1 or 2 varieties. What about the guys that have got 6?
Are you talking about you, Riggs?
Possibly. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this.
I bet Riggs' yard was green in February.
I'm going to get some hate on this podcast because my yard does not look good at all.
Could we get a picture of your yard right here?
Darn. But I got St. Augustine, I got Bermuda, I got weeds,
and that's something something I'm gonna ask him about St. Augustine. But yeah,
I mean, fertilization does vary. Some with say a Bermuda or a Zorgia, and then as opposed to a St. Augustine on what it really needs. But your P and K doesn't change a lot there, or there is a range. Obviously, you can go online to any university that has an ag program, be it Mississippi State or Auburn or anybody like that, and they'll have a turf recommendation for different ones. But there's a range where you say, okay, I've got St. Augustine, and I've got some Zorgia in the back, and I've got Bermuda, and you can kind of manage them closely enough where it's not a big worry and be fine.
at least on the fertilizer side.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's what I was
yes,
about to say.
yes.
Fertilizer's a lot
Yeah.
easy on different types of grass, but you run into issues with your weed control and
Oh,
your
absolutely.
mowing
It's
height.
night and day on some of those.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So if you do have, I know a lot of reasons people have St. Augustine Gaston being one of them. You got some shady spots, and it seems to handle it a little better than at least the common Bermuda.
Yeah, that is the best one in our area, our kind of general area, that handles shade the best. Zorgia is a little better than Bermuda, which is, and Centipede is also in there, which is not a very common.
Would they be easier to manage St. Augustine from a weed perspective?
No.
Really?
Bermuda
Absolutely
yeah.
not.
Bermuda is
No.
absolutely the
easiest.
easiest because there's so many options that will not hurt Bermuda that are labeled for turf. When I say for a lawn, there are some things that are labeled for sod in a sod farm that we are not labeled to use, residentially. And then there's but there are tons of chemicals that started out in the ag market that are, now available for residential use.
Going back to talking about this fertilizer a little bit, in my prior world, we'd have a lot of people come in and want to know, what do I put on my grass? And I always started with, if you want the perfect answer, the soil sample is what you've got to do, to know.
That's right.
And then really what it was for also was if I told somebody, hey, you're probably going to need 200 pounds of this per acre, and that would turn into a bigger purchase, or how many bags they're going to buy.
Sure.
Sometimes you needed the soil sample to back it up to say, yes, this is really what I need. And then I've always been told the pH level is so important on allowing that fertilizer to do what it's supposed to do.
Oh yeah, I have a chart under my glass in my desk that if you get below about 5.5, you start getting tied up, and if you get above about 7.5, I mean it goes from, let's say, between 7.2, which 7 is considered neutral, but from about 7.2 to 8, it goes from I can't remember the charts exactly, maybe 85% efficiency down to about 12.
Wow.
It really goes down.
And people just don't think of the pH.
No,
It's lime.
and we had that trouble on a football field.
Yeah.
A few years ago, they brought in and recrowned it, and they brought dirt that came from a dirt pit. It was kind of a mixed dirt, but it was good dirt. And I looked on the sideline. My daughter's cheerleader, so we're at all the ball games, and I looked on the sideline. I said, "Man, where they're standing is not recovering." And I knew it was a hybrid grass. It was the one that is Tiff Way, which is supposed to recover a little faster. And I was like, "Man, I don't know." And anyway, softball game the next day, the football coach he goes, "Hey, can you come look at this?" And he was like scraped his foot across and it was no roots. He goes, "What is going on?" I said, "Let me get a soil sample first." And the pH was 8.2. Wow. So we had to put a bunch of sulfur out to help bring the pH down, fix the problem.
And how many people that have that issue in their yard go buy a bag of fertilizer and just dump it on the? I mean, that's the thought process.
Well, I equate that to having that good soil sample is equating to hey, what do I need to spray on my yard? Well, what weeds are out there? I don't know, a bunch of stuff. Well, you can throw the kitchen sink, but same way with that. It's the visually looking at those weeds and knowing what to spray on them. It would be the same as visually looking at the soil sample results,
right?
And knowing.
And I think you mentioned you being a part of that, helping somebody through it. I do think it's a big advantage to have somebody that to read the soil sample and help you understand how to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
As far as getting it we had a lot of people do it. That you would just go pull your own sample, and then you go on to one of these lab websites. And they would have a check-in sheet that you kind of just write your stuff on, and you put it in a box and ship it to them, or take it to the lab that's closest to you. So that's an option. It's just the reading when it comes back. The results are sometimes a little tough if you don't do that a lot.
Yeah, they can be. In some of the ones, like the lab we use to do all of our analysis, we do our own analysis after we get the raw data, but. Yeah. They will actually give you you can put in Bermuda grass yard or St. Augustine yard, and they'll actually give you a recommendation.
You know what? I'm going to do this as a reward for our early listeners. You get that soil sample done. Why don't you just send it to us at onthetailgate@wadeinc.com. Yeah. We'll have an expert take a look at it and get you some kind of a recommendation. Even if it's just Riggs, we'll send you a recommendation.
Yeah.
Riggs is going to send it to me, so I can look at it.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask the question that I've heard a bunch. If I do have a good stand of St. Augustine, but I do have some weeds here and there, what can I do?
There are a bunch of good options for St. Augustine.
I would disagree.
There are a few good options. Yeah. There's a bunch of options. Now, some of them are considered pre. And that's the whole thing when you get into St. Augustine is you're in a box, so to speak. The options that are there are pretty good if you can do them timely. Mm-hmm. Now that gets into wind and rainfall, and when can I put it out? Who is somebody going to put it out for me? Whatever. Mm-hmm. But 2,4-D, Simazine, some of those type products are all labeled at lower rates. For St. Augustine, the best thing with St. Augustine, go a pre-approach.
That's what I was kind of getting is if you do have that good stand, your best plan of attack is to keep the weeds from ever showing up.
And I'd argue that for all grass types.
Oh, absolutely.
The best, it's huge.
The best defense against weed pressure in a yard is a good thick lawn of whatever you're growing.
Is there any reason to not put that would it hurt the yard to put the pre-out before the St. Augustine has come out of dormancy, or does that not affect the
No,
bringing up?
that's what I would suggest doing.
Yep.
That's the best
Get it
way
before
to
the
fight
weed comes up. Yep.
Yeah, and we used to run into that years ago. If somebody had St. Augustine, hey, can you come out and look at my yard? Everybody else is starting to spray. It'd be springtime, and it was already starting to green up. And you're like, well, okay, here are our options now. But to your point, yes, there haven't been as many good options, but the list has grown some.
I would
On
just
some
say,
of the new yard chemicals that are
Yeah.
strictly
they just
Yard
some of the
chemicals.
ones that are you're not gonna hurt it it just doesn't work very well. I would say.
Oh, that's right.
And then, like you said, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but that's what I struggle with when you get chemicals like in season in the middle of the summer, like MSMA.
Oh, right.
Those
Yeah,
kind
you
of
can't-
you don't have anything like that.
Yeah,
just,
we lost MSMA even in Bermuda yards.
yeah,
It's not labeled anymore. It's still labeled on golf courses.
Yeah.
And I think for cotton. I think cotton and golf courses inside farms. Those are the only
yeah.
places.
So I guess I shouldn't speak on that.
Yeah, we can't do that. Yeah, and just to
We did
remind
not. That did not happen.
That's not a recommendation.
That was hypothetical.
Well, and everybody that's listening to this, always read and follow label directions.
Right.
That's the key there. To put out, because there are a lot of things that are labeled, but sometimes there are things that are not labeled. And that's the thing on the chemical side. And I'll just say this real quick is, there may be a product, let's just say an insecticide, imidacloprid, which has got a million different trade names now, generics and things. But when you look at that, there's only, say, a handful of, out of 10, there may only be 3 that are labeled for residential turf or yard, lawns. So just got to kind of watch that,
That's a bunch of good information there. I'm actually going to go back and listen to this and take some of these recommendations. I tried to make some notes over here, but so I want to move out of the yard. Let's move up closer to the house, get into some of the flower beds. If I'm looking for a good-looking landscape, but maybe want to watch the dollars, what are some options for me that stuff that looks good, easy to maintain?
You're
stuff
talking
like that?
shrubs and stuff too.
Yeah.
In front of your house.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at if you're starting from scratch, I even did this when we built our first house because we were starting from nothing. I hired a landscape architect just to draw the beds and give me suggestions. I said 2 to 3 suggestions in every area, or some alternate possibilities. Oh, we don't like Nandinas or whatever. Abelias. Give me some options on, And so then he drew it out to scale for me, and then we did everything ourselves. We built the beds, put the amendment in there, and we tilled them. We did that with, everything to scale, let them settle a little bit, and then we went and purchased the plants and planted it all. But I would suggest doing that unless you have done it or are good at it, as far as starting from scratch and then once you get some experience with it, what we've done, we've added to the house where we live now. We've done all that ourselves, obviously, but that's,
Once you get the foundation,
25 years worth of experience on fooling with plants and messing up sometimes and going, oh, that didn't work there. But yeah, there, so that's the first deal is knowing what you want, what will fit to scale in the area you're trying to put it in.
Right.
Obviously, you don't want to put a Natchez white crepe myrtle in a spot that's 4 by 4. It's gonna get big and right up against your house, that kind of thing. Budget friendly things, most of them are, especially if you have time to let them grow. I mean, you can get smaller crepe myrtles, hollies, Indian hawthorns, boxwoods, anything like that. My suggestion, I like a 3-gallon on potted plants. I like to get 3-gallon ones. Now, there are options if you have a covered trailer or something like that where you can go down where the nurseries are
and
and not pay. You're really not paying retail when you're getting big plants. Now, you go for one plant, it's not worth a trip, 4-hour trip to go. But if you're putting a whole big bed in,
If you're starting from scratch, then you
yes,
need to
and
take
that's
that
exactly
down the coast.
exactly
Yeah.
what we did. And you can do really good as far as on a budget. I mean, I think we, you look at full retail for what we put in was going to be, maybe $5,000 or so, and we spent like $1,700.
Wow. Worth the trip.
Definitely.
Worth
I mean,
the
there's
trip.
big markup in those, and I'm not, disparaging any retail nursery. They've got to pay to keep it watered and to bring
absolutely.
it in. They
Lot
got
of
to pay a
inputs.
broker to get their stuff in and all those things. But you can, if you're going to do one big trip like that, you can save some money, and you can get bigger plants that way, healthier. And the whole trick there, being able to keep what you got is get the biggest pots you can afford. I mean, there'll be a 1 gallon looks really cheap, but then the 3 gallon is not a whole lot more. But you think, oh well, I'll save that money. Well, you got 1 gallon worth of roots versus 3,
Yeah.
and it gets a better start.
That makes a lot of sense.
But things, there are so many plants even to name, but most of the ones that you would plant in mass, meaning, say, along a bed where you have 7 or 8 hollies, something like that, or nandinas, or abelias, or hawthorns, or any kind of bush that's like an evergreen.
Right.
And that's the other thing. Do you want evergreen in these areas, or do you want deciduous? Meaning, do you mind if in this area the leaves come off crepe myrtle and it's going to be naked, for the winter?
Yeah.
That's fine in this area, but over here I want evergreen, so I'm going to plant a tree-form ligustrum or whatever. So as you go through that, but most of the plants are pretty hardy. Most of the common bushes, and then obviously people will leave areas to fill in with either bulbs that will come back every year that will flower and then kind of be gone.
Add a little color in the spring.
Or to
yeah.
put pansies, or later in the spring putting maybe impatiens, or even geraniums, or anything they may plant that they would plant again next year. So just planting, probably proper planning is one big key to say, okay, how do I want this laid out, where I want things to go, so you're not digging up. So, we didn't like that,
Yeah.
so we're going to dig up and redo over here and dig up and redo. But I mean, you can be budget conscious pretty easily, especially like I said, if you can go to somewhere and get a block of things. But if you're just adding 1 or 2 things here or there, once you kind of get it done, it's most of the stuff. Unless you're getting something that's just really oversized or a really specialty item, most of it's not bad.
Pretty good. And but I look for watch the pot. That's a good tip from this, and that's not something I'd ever. If I had 2, like I bought a bunch of Encore azaleas last year, and if I looked at 2 of them side by side, and one of them was in a 1 gallon, and one of them was in a 3 gallon, I never would have even. I mean, it makes perfect sense what you said. It's like you got that much more root growth that's ready to help that plant be established. That's something.
Yeah.
That's something to definitely watch for.
Yeah, and once you get into those, especially when you're start getting a bunch of them or whatever, you are going to pay more because they've had to carry that plant another year or 2
Yeah.
in a hothouse or in a nursery to get it to develop. But when you look at sustainability and survivability, the chances are a lot greater that they're gonna stay.
make it.
So you draw your line between your grass and where your bushes and shrubs and flowers and everything starts. What is your base, and what are you putting down around them? I'm thinking of mulch. I'm thinking
That
of
was
pine
my.
straw.
That was going to be my next
So,
question.
And then after you're putting that down, weed control in those areas, because a lot of stuff we spray for weeds can have an effect on those plants and flowers, I think. So what's your management practices there?
If I was starting from scratch, either a new home or redoing beds in an existing, where you've lived for a while or you moved to, I obviously want my beds built up somewhat. Maybe 6 inches. Maybe it depends on the terrain and where we're talking about exactly. But I like mine to be 6 to 8 inches taller than than my yard. So then they slope forward a little bit, so everything's going to drain, and then I'm going to edge. I actually have a bed redefiner.
I was
You
gonna
can
bring that
get the
up.
commercial one, which I used. I had a buddy that had one years ago, and it makes a little bit better trench than the one we have, the steel one. But the steel one's good for redoing, and it's certainly worth the money to get. And
Creates that contrast,
instead of
too.
having to have that, that little sharpshooter shovel where you're
Yeah.
remaking them every year or
Nobody got
whatever
time
as
for
they
that.
fill in. Right. This kind of a quick deal, and but back to building them, I just use a good sandy loam to light mixed soil. Try to get that, and some type of soil amendment. I have used rice hulls, and I have some rice hulls that I got a hold of, and I'm using now again. But any kind of, I think, who makes that? Bonnie. There's a bunch of brands, but the last one I had was some Bonnie plant. Where you get the Bonnie plants, the little tomatoes and stuff. The Bonnie Nursery. They have a gardening soil that's like an amendment. It's just a lot of organic matter, a lot of really good, helps hold moisture, and that's what the rice hulls will do. Once they are broken down, if you get ones that have done, it's just basically 100% organic matter. And what it does is when you can till that up, turn it over with a shovel, whatever you need to do. But what I did was put a layer of dirt, layer of holes, layer of dirt, layer of holes, till I got it where I wanted it, tilled it really good, let it settle, might had to put a little more. And so that gets into a time deal where you don't want to be in a hurry if you can help it, because let it settle over time a little
it
bit.
right,
Okay,
yeah.
I need to put a little more or not or whatever, and then go define those edges how you want them, either with your shovel or whatever you're doing. Put a good dose of fertilizer, whether it be something like an Osmocote, which is a slow release, the gold colored, or the green, even some triple 13. Obviously, I did a soil sample in mine when I did them.
Even with the new dirt, you
I
put
did.
the new stuff in.
I did
Immediately soil
because
sample.
because the dirt it was field dirt. It was good sandy dirt that we had gotten out of a dirt pit. It was the same stuff we put in our yard when we built our house and built everything up with. And so, yes, could I have guessed and said, yeah, it's probably about the same. But I went ahead and pulled soil sample there too.
not?
So I knew what I had, and it was about the same. But and that way you know what your fertilizer needs to be. Do you need to put some lime? And people say, oh, well, that people that deal with ag say, well, I can't put ag lime out. How am I going to work it in? I can't do this. I can't do that. Well, they have pelletized lime that reacts a little faster. A lot faster, actually, with the soil, but it doesn't go as deep, and you got to put more, that kind of thing. But you can do some stuff with pelletized
And it's
lime.
cheap.
And you
It's
can
real
and you can
cheap.
spread it with a regular little fertilizer spreader.
Yeah.
So there's some things you can do there, but the beds, getting the beds right, and then getting them till them as deep as you can, so it's more kind of like potting soil when you get through, and it gives those plants that much more survivability.
Go,
Yeah.
You've got the plants in the ground. You've got your bed established. Then what on top? Are you doing anything mulch?
Are you team
straw?
pine straw or team mulch?
No, well,
It's a good debate here. I feel
I guess
like.
you don't have to put anything.
no.
But I think a lot
not
of people
really.
do that to kind of clean up, maybe cover up some
Well, and,
bad looking spots.
and you can put and it helps as a weed barrier too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the thing after when you put the plants in is just getting something like a preen or prodiamine or one of those that's strictly basically only pre-emerge, where you're not going to hurt an existing plant. And then you got to look at, okay, am I going to put wildflower seeds in this little corner or something? You got to take that into account. But doing the weed barrier, and some people do the weed barrier, the plastic or whatever, and then put the mulch over that. I'm not a big fan of that.
Every time I've had one of those,
myself.
my tiller grabs it one year.
Yeah, I'm not.
And then it's over with.
And it does. I mean, it does obviously help, but it's a little bit different management scheme. But yeah, once you do that, I mean, we were team pine straw at one time when we had, but we had a different color brick.
Oh yeah.
So
you
our
got to
brick
take
was
that into
more,
account.
Yeah, you got to go with what looks good in your house. Obviously, pine bark nuggets float worse.
Yeah, take that into because that's a fantastic point because the city's drain. I'm a low spot for the neighborhood. And so when we got this 4-inch rain a couple of days ago, my front yard, it just, as that drain is trying to keep up, it'll inch up and it'll get into my flower beds. When I first moved into the house, I put mulch out and I lost that corner of mulch. It was just spread throughout the neighborhood. Now I got pine straw and I keep it real, I blow it up and keep it taut, and it stays put.
Yeah, that is the one good thing about pine straw, is it does not float readily. Now it can obviously wash away in a big rain, but that's a real advantage for pine straw. And again, you gotta match your surroundings. But we use a hardwood mulch. We use a brown color because it matches our brick better.
You about can find all different colors.
Oh,
on
every
there.
color. Yeah. Black and brown are my favorite two colors to match as far as and I'm not in opposition to pine straw. Just
Whatever works.
Whatever works.
Yeah, it's harder to adjust the pine straw color.
Well,
But
are you the guy that
I
paints
do
it?
have a cheat code. I do have a cheat code.
He's figured it out.
You can go, and I was nervous about it, but we had a party at our house a couple of years ago coming up, and I was like, my pine straw still is in good shape. It's just got a weird fade to it, but it was still intact. So I got on. I said, surely somebody makes a pine straw dye. So I got on Amazon, and I found a pint jar bottle of pine straw dye. And you mix it, you use very little of it, mix it in a regular sprayer, and
Just a pump up spray.
I'll tell you what, it worked. I mean, it worked really well to the point where I don't want to buy a new pine straw anymore.
There's
Really?
a video, I think, of you spraying it out
Yeah.
there. So
Well,
we maybe need to put that.
What
He's
color?
talking about
that
it.
video. We'll put it up there.
It's- I mean, I thought it was going to look cheap.
What
And-
color
and
was it?
It was. I mean, it took it back to like
So like the
pine straw color.
Yeah.
And they say, I think that maybe it they got some weird sales pitch in there. I didn't care if it extended the life of the pine straw. I just wanted it to look good. And it did. And it really, and of course, if you're driving down the road, if you're not standing in the flower bed and you're just driving down the road, it looks fantastic. Now you get down there, you start looking at it, you're like, wait a second, this guy spray painted his pine straw.
Yeah.
Isn't there a glue mulch glue?
That's the. I'm not going to vouch for that.
Well,
I'll vouch for the pine straw paint. I
Yeah,
tried the mulch glue, and I don't know if I didn't do it right or something, but
I knew there was one. I've never used
it floated away.
Really?
I tried it actually
it all floated away
on the
It's one big-
IntelliFarm lot out here because it was a little area. So I bought a bottle, sprayed it on thick. Did not work. It was shiny for like 2 days.
But I do like mulch, Gaston, back to your question, of some sort for, number one, weed, help. It also helps hold moisture because it gives that insulator on top of the ground, so it keeps sunlight from penetrating all the way onto the dirt and baking the dirt. And so it holds more. Now, again, a reaction has a reaction. So you're going to have a better chance to have fungus in your flower beds. You just got to kind of watch that. It's not a big issue. We've never had a big issue with it, but that is
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, but it does help hold moisture and keep sunlight off. So I am a proponent for sure.
So
of
you talking about a little raised flower beds. What about for your garden? Do you have raised garden beds, or you just
well, yes and no. So we don't have garden beds that are defined as far as the raised ones. They're just on like a mound where we grow, and really the only thing we're growing on them is our new potatoes, because we're using rice hulls and they're so loose that they grow really well in there. And so I just took them and mounted them up a couple of feet, and so it looks like a row. It's 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall, give or take. And we planted all our potatoes, and then I'll till it up when the potato season is over, and then I'll kind of refreshen it up, and then you'll have to add some over time. But I don't keep them in a confined area. Mm-hmm. That's great too if you do in a raised bed that is either corrugated tin, or how you can build
the ones
them.
you buy at Tractor Supply or something,
different ones, and they're all great. But we don't do that in our garden. We just have it on the same row. We have our asparagus because asparagus is, stays there 25 years, they say.
Yeah. All right. So on the raised bed, let's say I do have that tin garden from Tractor Supply.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting out. what do I need to put in? I don't need to fill that entire thing. Do I need to buy the potting soil and fill the entire thing with it, or can I just get a load of dirt and start with it?
You can. You can also, if you have dirt available, what a lot of people do that have limited resources on getting hold of dirt and that kind of thing, and they're doing their garden soil out of the bag, basically, to fill it up at the end. What a lot of people do is put cardboard at the bottom for a weed barrier and just to, keep everything
just separate
there.
it from
They
anything
put
else.
sticks, firewood. A lot of times put a layer of that, and all that's going to rot down at sometime. But it's basically a filler, a space filler if you don't need it. Now, if the bed is not, but if the little garden.
Yeah, it all depends on how tall it is.
Yeah, if it's
right.
not but a couple of feet tall, then put a little dirt in the bottom and put, your raised bed. So because you're going to need almost 2 feet. Now, if it's 4 feet tall, where it's, waist height kind of deal, then, that's where you would put the
You don't want to buy that
cardboard
many
and
bags of
no,
potting soil.
No, because you'll never
Wasted
utilize all of it. And obviously you're going to have to refresh that over time. So when you do that in a 4 foot deal, as that stuff kind of melts down, you just keep adding to it, and then the firewood will go away and all those things. But that's where I see people doing that. I've never done that personally. Never had one that tall.
What about gin trash?
Yeah, gin trash works
I
good.
mean, I think my wife has done it. We that's all we've put in the bed before. I don't know if that was the best practice.
No,
but
gin trash
really
is
well.
really, really good. There's a lot of, and if you look on the ag side with where the nutrient sinks are, there's a lot of nutrients in gin trash.
It is.
That's what my dad uses for his pumpkin.
Yeah.
For the record,
Yeah.
pumpkin. Wow.
He got 2 tons of it and put out the other day.
Wow.
On the garden, just spread it in the garden.
That's what it takes, man. That's what it takes to be a state record holder.
State record.
That's right.
And that's probably also why Gaston's tomatoes were still producing in January this year, because you just planted them and sold gin trash.
Well, it wasn't a bad winter, I would say, like you
Yeah.
were talking about. So we've probably some plants extended out their life more so than
ours did
Yeah.
as well. They went way deep to the point where we just pulled them up because
Yeah, you're tired of them.
Well, yeah, and we knew they wouldn't have time. They wouldn't be, tomatoes get kind of mealy in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Sometimes, they just don't have the sunlight and the heat to kind of do their thing and do, get right. And but we still had them.
So if somebody's wanting to start a garden in their yard, what would you say is kind of their go-to vegetables, maybe fruits, that would be somewhat easier to manage, that grow well in this area? I know that everybody that if you've been doing a garden for a long time, you try to, what's the next thing? I know he talks about,
Squash,
what's the next thing I can do
zucchini,
to see what I can do?
tomatoes.
What would you suggest for somebody that wants to get into it?
Yeah, obviously goes to what your likes and loves
Right.
are as far as what you like to eat. But let's just say you're not picky like I am. Obviously tomatoes, and there are several ways to grow tomatoes. Doesn't have to be in an in-ground garden. Pots, buckets, hanging,
upside down. The upside down
hanging.
tomato.
I have seen all of those things work, and work pretty well. When I didn't think, I was like, "There's no way that's going to work." But
It was a QVC sensation for a couple of years.
wasn't it? But tomatoes, squash, zucchini. If you like growing your own peas, to me, nothing beats a fresh snap bean. Those are really good. Pink-eyed purple hulls, they're a little more work because you got to actually shell them and not just snap them at the end. But if you have a sheller or a way to get them shelled, those are wonderful too. There's several other kind of squashes. We like butternut squash, the Peter Pan, the white scallop squash. Those are really good because they're kind of mild and buttery. Okra, obviously,
How
is
hard is it to grow a potato?
really not hard.
So you just get a potato from the grocery store, cut it in half, and throw it out there.
Actually, since we have Tractor Supplies in our area now, we used to do that years and years ago. Just go to the, some little market. It usually wasn't Kroger's. They threw all that out before. But go to one of those little mom and pop markets where they had potatoes that were starting to sprout, and you just cut that. You want at least one eye for each one, slits, and just plant them in the ground. or in your bed. Obviously, compacted ground is not. You want something that's loose. That's why we do the rice hulls the way we do them, because they're loose. But now with Tractor Supply, they actually have seed potato, what they call seed potatoes. We bought the ones we got. We got the purple, the ones that you see in the store that are the new potatoes,
the small
that are
yeah.
purple on the inside. And then we got the red skinned ones. They're called red potatoes. They're white on the inside, but they're really good. And then we got Yukon Gold because they're so mild. They're creamy and buttery. Yeah. That Yukon Gold, everybody likes that.
That's the ones that come in the yellow bag. Yeah, we love those.
And so they had those in seed potatoes and had ones, a bunch more varieties, but that was just the 3 we planted.
What time of year do you grow potatoes?
You can plant them in the middle of January.
Really? And how long till they're mature, or how long till harvest?
What's today? The 10th. We have flowers on some right now, and when they're flowering, once they start to flower pretty heavily, they're putting on new potatoes. Once they start to flower, they're putting on, but to actually harvest a good set of them, you want them to be flowering pretty good, and then you can do it at the end of flowering. You can get them again, and if you're careful, if you can get some loose enough soil where you can just kind of part the soil in there, or whether it's rice hulls or whatever, and you can pull the potatoes off without pulling the whole plant, and you get
let
to
the
keep,
other ones go
you
to
keep
maturity.
harvesting.
Yeah,
That's right. You get to keep harvesting. Now,
So one Yukon Gold potato. How many potatoes are you going to get from that?
we actually just planted them whole this time because they were smaller, because they're considered seed potatoes. But you could cut them or plant them whole. The directions actually say you could do either or. And we just planted them whole because it was easy. And we had a big, long row, but there's enough seed potatoes in there. We planted, I think, 14 of each plant. And then the Yukon Gold, we planted 10. So I think we had 38 plants. And that's way plenty. I mean, we'll have enough for the whole community. But we didn't cut them because, and they do, if you do that, they will come up thicker. But normally you can cut them just as long as you got one eye.
One eye.
Mm-hmm.
What about, you have any fruit trees?
We do.
What kind?
Pears, figs, peaches, plums.
Okay, he has all the fruit trees. He has all the fruit trees.
I think that's it.
Garden of Eden out there.
Yeah.
And we're planting. We learned, so when we built our house, we had some land that went with it, and we had an orchard, and we planted pecan trees and peach trees in there. And they were eating peaches, fresh peaches. Well, we figured out, just by trial and error with us, we had a couple of trees that had limbs that came up below the graft, and they were grafted to, and these were all freestone peaches, obviously a little bit easier to eat fresh and that kind of thing for market, but they were cling peaches. So cling peaches are a little more crisper. They're a little more rubbery. I don't mean that in a bad way,
right,
but they hold together a little better. So if you freeze them and making cobblers and cooking them down, so to speak, they all hold up. Those hold up better. So they came up and cling. So we did them and saved them, and we were like, if we plant any more, we're going to plant cling peaches. So when we moved, we do have some eating peaches, but most of ours are for canning. But we're freezing, we're really not canning the peaches, and they it's for cooking over the winter, and we'll use some in season. Obviously, ours are new. We only planted them. We haven't been there that long in this house. I guess they're 3 or 4 years old.
How long after planting them till they produce?
About 3 to 4 years.
Really?
Ours are. This is the 4th year, and they have fruited so heavily. We're going to have to pull some off.
Wow, that's great.
So to keep from breaking. Because we'll go backwards.
I've grown up around fruit trees. My grandparents and know a little bit about them, and then we moved into town, and I actually have a pear tree in my yard and a peach tree that hasn't produced really at all. But what I think that people don't think about fertilizer as much with the fruit trees as they do with a garden or with their bushes and flowers and all that kind of stuff. What are your practices on getting fertilizer for a fruit tree?
Yeah, even my fig trees, which figs are tough. Those go back to biblical times.
Yeah.
Which is one reason I love figs. That's just figs, olive, dates, things like that go back
Been around for
to
a
the
minute,
beginning of time.
We
kind
grew
of
up
thing.
pulling those off the tree and eating them
Yeah.
out in the yard at my grandparents' house.
And the figs we have are not the common big fig like a lot of people had. We have a brown turkey and a Celeste, which are really, really good. So I fertilize those less than I would my peach and plum and pear trees a little bit, because fig trees are tough and they're made to survive, but they will bear better if you give them some attention.
And you can put out too much fertilizer.
Absolutely. So I err on the side of caution as far as, because I'm not putting out per acre. And, as an agronomist, I do everything on a per acre basis, or I think that way. So when I'm doing, I have to kind of equate that per square foot. And I'm not fertilizing, because we have we have a couple of lots across the street that go with our place. And I don't fertilize that like I do my main yard, because it's that many more acres. Right. I don't want to have to, manage so intensely. So I treat it around the root area. And my fig trees are young. They're making figs. I mean, they're 3 to 4 years old as well. But I fertilize them a little less than I do my peach trees. But I basically give them what the guidelines kind of say on peach trees, because you can find that in with pecan production in anywhere who has an ag program, again, Mississippi State, Auburn, whoever, everybody that's in the ag business, they have guidelines for fruit and nut production. Figs are not something that are commercially done, really, not here. So they don't really have guys. So you kind of have to shoot from the hip a little bit there.
Fig preserves.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We do them whole and some mashed, but the way we've been doing is whole, and they're good.
They're so good.
They are.
I want to get back to the general garden, not to rain on y'all's fruit.
I just love fruit trees. I love them.
Oh, they're wonderful. And look, and speaking of fruit trees too, just to mention to everybody, if you do go out and plant, 1, 10, whatever you've got room for, go and look on how to manage them, because fruit trees with the sweet wood, again, figs not so bad. They have some wasp issues where the wasp will get into the fig, and that's where they lay eggs and that kind of thing. You don't see
rude
that.
awakening.
Yeah, that's not something that's a horrible problem, but you do see that. But with peach trees, pear trees, plum trees, that kind of thing, that sweet wood is a dire attractant for insects, and then the insects are going to make a pathogen, a way for a pathogen to get in. Fungus, virus, those kind of things. And so fruit trees are really susceptible to that kind of thing. So there's a guideline, and I pretty much follow. I've looked up years ago when we had an orchard at our old house, starting at bloom break, doing this, doing that, and even if you did every other one, you'd be way ahead of the game.
So have a plan. Do your homework and have a plan.
If you want to,
and that's a lot of things.
And this relates to all managing your grass, your bushes, your fruit trees, your garden. Sometimes it's a real quick fix to get back on the right track. Insecticide or fungicide, and a lot of people don't think about the fungicide piece in your grass. But if you maybe get in touch with the right person or read enough on the internet to figure out what your problem is, it's probably a cheap fix out there and will not get you so frustrated that you don't try again the next year. That's what people run into that so much.
That's right. Yeah, especially with grass, because you can get a quick fix and go, oh, well, in a week it'll be back fine. If it's got some fungus in it, I sprayed it and it looks a little, sick or whatever, and then it'll be back. Fruit trees, not so much, because, you got one chance to keep that fruit protected, and maybe you only lose a few or whatever. Just got to watch it kind of closely. But yeah, that one requires a little more effort as far as planning, especially in a Bermuda grass yard. I mean, it's so forgiving.
It is,
and it's so aggressive that
just feed it and let it go.
Yeah, and we didn't mention that. I mean, I use a plant growth regulator in mine.
Oh yeah, if you get it, I know I've talked to you about that before. If you get it where you want it.
Yep.
Then you hit it with that PGR.
And there are things you can do in your bushes too. There are lots of things that are kind of obscure. You don't find them at Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. But there are a lot of them you can order off the internet for different kinds of bushes. Plant growth regulators, ones that you might think, oh man, I got to trim this 3 times a year to keep it where I want it.
Just slow it down.
Yep, slow it down and get it where you want it in the spring. Trim it, now or May or whenever the time is, and then let it grow just a little bit. Get it where you want, and then hit it. And help stop.
Primo or something like that. Palisade, Primo.
That's what I use in my yard. Yeah.
And there's generics out there now.
Oh yeah, the T-neck. I think it's called T-nex.
Excel or something.
T-Nexapac is the
Yeah.
the.
I'm
so
a
there's
huge
several.
advocate for that.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
okay, you just don't like mowing your grass.
I can't use it in St. Augustine.
Wait, you can put that in your grass?
Yeah.
Well, you can put it on Bermuda.
Yeah.
I guess you can't put it on St. Augustine.
It doesn't do it. It doesn't. I don't think you can do it in St. Augustine.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
Zorge. I can't remember what all it's labeled on. There's
Bermuda's the
Zorge.
biggest thing, but
Yeah. And so it works well in Georgia too.
it's just it's not to just limit your cutting. The whole point of it is it stops growing up; it's growing out,
That's right. Thickens up.
and it keeps the weed pressure down,
It
and
does.
it makes a beautiful yard.
It really does, and gives it a
And-
good deep green color too. Now,
Yeah,
And you don't have to mow it as
and you
much.
don't have to.
I need this stuff.
yeah, because I'm mowing.
Sounds like you need a lot, Rick.
when I get aggressive on fertilizer, I'm mowing 3 times a week. Really,
And look,
Three
real
times
quick,
a week?
sometimes I'm mowing every other day.
I
When
feel like
it's
y'all
really,
are mowing for different reasons, though.
I
You're
mow
mowing so
just-
you can see your front door.
Yeah, I mow so people quit saying go
Loper's,
mow your yard.
Loper's mowing to have a fantastic looking
Yard of the week.
I mean, I make sure I mow in different directions, so you don't make traffic patterns.
I bet Riggs mows at 16
But
miles an
because
hour.
if-
You
because-
can see where I turn around.
Well,
'cause
but
it's
if
the
you-
same spot every time.
well,
Right
but
there.
if you are mowing that regularly, you will when there's
some tracks.
moisture, you will make some tracks, especially in a thicker yard because you're just going to see those. So yeah, I try to do that too,
All right.
and I try to keep the plant growth regulator on it so I don't have to mow every other day.
running out of time. So
Yeah.
I'm going to get my gosh dang questions
All right,
in on my
come on.
tomatoes and my squash.
All right,
So give me tomato 101. I got my garden. I grow tomatoes every year. What are some things I need to watch out for to make sure that I have? What are some common mistakes, I guess, that people make with tomatoes?
so knowing whether you have an indeterminate or determinate variety,
Which
That's-
is something people may not even look at.
Yeah, that's one thing to know how to manage them better. I always all the old timers always said, and they're right. That was an old deal. Make sure you pull all the suckers off and all that kind of thing. That will be different for an indeterminate than it would be a determinate variety. Pruning it properly to get maximum fruiting potential. And you can read, man, there's so many articles on
Again, use the resources
the
that are
internet,
available
the
to you.
Pinterest, even Pinterest. I mean, you can go look how to prune a tomato. I mean, there are things everywhere.
Yeah. Fire my
YouTube.
Pinterest account back up.
Yeah. There are things literally everywhere on how to prune your tomato, how to pluck your squash right, pull the leaves off the bottom if you want to. There's all kind of ways to do, and some of them kind of are dependent on where you are. Are your tomatoes in a confined area, or do they have plenty of room and you have a huge cage that you're staking or
Yeah.
whatever you're doing? So that matters a little bit too. So you can go get those resources and look. So pruning your tomatoes, knowing if you've got indeterminate, determinate variety, so knowing how to feed the fertilizer. Don't give it too much fertilizer, but you got to give it enough. And there are easy guidelines for different varieties on what they may say do. And then knowing what you have and what you want out of it. Big boys, big girls, better girls. Heirlooms, do you want celebrities? Do you want beefsteak? Do you want Cherokee purple? All those have to be managed a little differently.
A little differently, yeah.
Knowing what you have and just looking up something on the internet. On what? Okay,
Big boy.
a Cherokee purple.
Big boy.
All this is so over my head.
And it really gets. I know that sounds like I'm getting complicated with it, but it's really not. You just say, okay,
Right, yeah.
I got big boys. I'm planting all big boys and better boys. Just say.
So do your
I've
research.
always been a big boy.
Do your
Yeah.
research for that.
Do your research and say what's the just look up on YouTube. Everybody has the internet now. What is the best way to prune my big boy or better boy? Where to pull the suckers, where to look, where to do. And just doing that, you will have a better crop. Now, keeping insects and fungus and viruses off of it. Most of these varieties we have now are pretty much viral resistant. They don't get tomato mosaic virus and all those kind of things like some of those older varieties did. That's not a big concern, but they will get blight. Blight is everybody talks about tomato blight, and that's very common. So but we also have some common fungicides and insecticides. The best way to do it. So what causes that blight most of the time are thrips. Thrips will suck on tomatoes, and it takes a lot of them to cause a lot of damage, but they're giving
that pathway
to get in. And so what I do is I use there's one that you can get at Home Depot or I think even Walmart. It's a Bayer Complete type. That's just one of them. It's imidacloprid and Baythroid, basically, or it's a cyfluthrine. It's just, and you can spray your tomatoes about once a week with it, and you keep the insects off. So it not only treats for the blight that hasn't gotten there yet. It's a preemptive, kind of a precautionary type treatment, but it also, has that residual and it's getting in the plant. So if some insects get by between that week, then it's not going to cause you any problem.
Well, that same, can I spray that on my squash too to keep those bugs off of it? Because that's something I run into every year.
Yes.
Is that squash? I guess it's the squash bug or whatever it is.
Yeah, squash bugs are horrible. And if you
eat
don't,
that stalk and
they eat through that stalk and it looks like it's great. And you look down there and your stalk's got holes all in it.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later it's dead.
Well, the plant handles it, but or there for a little bit, but it will not fruit. It'll,
well, that's right, because it's disrupting.
It's in survival mode.
That's right,
yeah.
And it's disrupting that xylem and phloem through the stalk of the plant, where it's transmitting water and nutrients, and it can't do its thing. And then all of a sudden, when it gets hot and dry, the first hot and dry spell,
it's gone. That happens. I mean, I've seen that.
And squash bugs have gotten a lot worse. That all goes back to we could talk all day about that. How when we had a ton of cotton and we were spraying a lot of insecticides and all those things, we did not have the insects. Stink bugs were not nearby as big a problem. Nobody ever had hardly, squash bugs were not as bad.
But as your cotton acres have fallen, you've seen the insect pressure come back.
And not so much yes and no, because, even in the cotton, we're not spraying like we used to spray because we've got, things that are bred into
genetics,
the cotton.
Traits,
Traits. So, we got... insect. We've had an insect shift over the last few years, so we're having to more intensely manage our gardens and yards. Just like in a yard, we can get chinch bugs. Did we ever get chinch bugs in the yard years ago? Yeah, but not like we can now. And are they a common problem? No. What is the worst problem in a Bermuda grass yard? We talk about it.
My goodness,
every year. You and I talk about it in the fall.
Got attacked
we used to
by
never
them last
have,
year. Yeah.
Never had armyworms. When I was growing up as a kid. And my parents still live in that same house, and now he has to spray for armyworms every year too.
Man, I thought my lawn was moving.
Oh yeah,
last fall or last late summer. I mean, I was looking out there and I was like, I thought it was a dead spot, like a dry spot or something. And I went out there and the blades of grass, it looked like was moving. They're all over.
Oh
the
yeah,
place.
and they
knocked them out real quick.
Yep.
I mean, it didn't take much, but
there are 2 or 3 good options for that. But chinch bugs are actually worse than St. Augustine. That's where they would be bad, and they've gotten worse and at times. And people say, man, my St. Augustine yard just looks kind of sick. It just doesn't look like it's coming out good, and a lot of times it's chinch bugs.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something to watch for.
Kind of want to get close to wrapping this thing up. Let's say that it's late April, early May. What's something people can do right now in yard, flower bed, garden to get off to a good start this summer or spring?
Obviously, in different areas of our AOR, grass is greening up better in the southern part than it is in places in the hills and places up north. It's just now coming on good. It's not too late to spray. There are certainly weed programs, more so in Bermuda and Georgia, but also in St. Augustine, that you can do to help combat weeds that if you have not sprayed. It's time to start looking at the first fertilizer application, whether it be your ammonium sulfate if you're going to do a light dose of that first, or your first turf fertilizer or whatever program you're going with. It's not too late to aerate. I've already aerated my yard, but I'm going to do it again in May.
Do you core aerate?
I do.
Is it, I've heard, so...
I have a John Deere core aerator.
My dad's got the big drum with the steel fingers. Mm-hmm. Is that actually aerating, or is that mainly causing more problems?
No. It's still good. It's like a spike aerator.
Yeah, it's just poking holes. I mean, but
I have no problem with the spike aerator. that one to me, you can run more often. As long as we're getting rain. Now, when it gets 100 degrees, I say shut that down. We're in survival mode then, whether we're irrigating or not. But as far as being able to run that spike aerator, like you could run it once every 2 to 3 weeks even and not hurt a thing. I mean, yes, you're slicing through some roots, but let's say in a Bermuda grass yard, it's so aggressive right now anyway, you're not even hardly setting it back.
Right.
Now, core aerating, they recommend, when I say they, the expert, the universities and stuff, twice a year, once in the spring and maybe once in the fall. I don't like to do it as much in the fall, depending on weather. If we get the right year, yeah.
You filling the holes with anything? Or are you coming back with sand? Or
I don't. That is a good time to do that. If you're going to do that, is core aerate either. Obviously, if you're real mowing your yard, you want to get those up because it's going to dull your blade so bad, and your bed knife. But chewing them up with your just your deck, or
just putting it back out there.
It back out there and and then it's a good time to sand behind it if you're gonna sand.
Yeah.
Definitely. But core aerating or slice aerating now, tine aerating, dethatching is still not too late to dethatch without hurting anything, especially when I say that more so in a Bermuda yard. And get ready for your fertilizer program. And I mean, that's about it right there. Now, as far as flower beds, it's a good time for, a lot of all the winter leaves, and even on the lake where you got cypress, the tassels they're about gone now that hang during the winter, they've been blown off. Now it's time to go in there with your flower beds.
The threat of frost is over, so if you want to go,
it looks like it's over. Possibly even trimming bushes, depending on where you are. I've got some bushes that need a little trim. I like to do that before I put fresh mulch out, just because you got to, you get those leaves out of your beds before you freshen up your mulch, and then I like to freshen up my mulch last.
I think the kicker in all this is to constantly monitor. Our conditions
be vigilant.
change.
That's right.
And that you just got to be.
And there's no silver bullet.
Right.
Ever. I mean, every person's management style could be a little bit different in a yard. And, sometimes it's, well, I want to do it this way. Well, that's not what my conditions are dictating to me. You got to kind of roll with it. But, yes, being vigilant. That's the best.
And I think if I'm a viewer or listener of this, maybe a little overwhelmed at how many different ways to do things. But I think it's starting with understanding what grass type you have, what plants you want to plant, what weeds am I trying to spray. That is where you have to start, and then you go and research online, talk to somebody who knows, a consultant, or everything's online now. And so really nail it down with what you're looking for, and then there's options there. It doesn't have to be overwhelming.
No, and it sounds like it could be overwhelming, and it can be overwhelming if you let it be.
Yeah.
But you can also compartmentalize it and say, okay, these are the plants I would like to have.
Yeah.
Where can I plant them?
Right.
Okay, well, these are not shade-loving bushes. They need to be in full sun. Okay, we need to plant them on this side of our house and not over here. Yeah. And that so you can kind of
have a plan. Step back, have a plan.
Sure.
Use the resources that are available to you. Do a soil sample. Have a good pre-emerge program everywhere.
Oh,
I mean, that's just that
Absolutely.
makes everything so much easier. And then enjoy that yard of the month sign being out there in front of the.
Well,
yard.
I'm gonna get it.
I want you to have progress reports on your yard as this year goes on. I want you to take what we've talked about on this episode and let's use the warehouse as our project.
The test plot.
Maybe a picture here and there.
Yeah, we'll probably drop
Throw
some
a
pictures
picture
in
in
every now and then on the tailgate and see how Riggs is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, I've enjoyed listening to you, and because I had no idea you had that wide of a range of, stuff in your garden, your fruit trees.
yeah, he thought he had a gotcha question with the fruit trees. And
No, I was wanting to hear I was hoping you did have some, and so just to hear about all the different ones, it sounds like because you have them in your yard, you've learned a lot about them over the years.
Oh,
and so
yeah, and you learn, if you enjoy it like we do and like you guys do. It sounds like, except for Riggs over there.
Yeah.
He's just
But
surviving.
if you enjoy it like
Convert
that,
him.
especially once you have the time to spend a little time and learn what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't need to do that again.
yeah,
Whatever. So you learn what not to do. Sometimes is the best lesson, and
It's some discipline there, and the reason being is that you've got to come home from work sometimes and do
Oh,
it
yeah.
after hours.
but,
Oh,
if
sure,
you, but
yeah.
if you
Kids
enjoy it,
if you enjoy it.
it's kind of like cooking. Some people come
Well,
home
it's
from
that
work
labor of love.
and they dread cooking, but if you enjoy cooking,
And that's the
then
thing, and
it's
I
not a-
understand. People that don't enjoy gardening, they'd rather go to
they
Kroger
want to
or
go to
Piggly
the
Wiggly or
county
whatever.
market or wherever.
I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. But it's if it is enjoyable, if you like watching things grow and you like harvesting things, you go, hey, we grew this. We did that. Just a brief thing when my kids were little. And we had to kind of quit gardening for a while because they were all playing. Both my girls were playing travel softball,
All over the place, yeah.
cheerleading, basketball, all the sports that they were involved in, which was great. And I don't, I say if your kids can do that, let them do it because they're gone. Mine are grown now, and we're back to gardening. But we had to kind of abandon gardening for a few years, or at least very intensely. But if you enjoy that, we ate supper, and I don't know what we had, grilled chicken or whatever with everything. We had zucchini. We had squash, we had eggplants, and we had tomatoes of some form or fashion. I think we had squash casserole and whatever. Those things, we grew all that except the chickens. We didn't have chickens at the house.
Is that something you're looking at adding?
Well, I think my wife would like to. She wants the chicken coop, but my sister-in-law has chickens. So
You
we
may
get
grab,
eggs
you may
and we
attract some of those gators out of the lake
yeah.
if you get some chickens up there.
That's
Then
supposed
you
to be
could
a
have-
wife
then-
thing. I mean,
We
or
had
a
all
woman
the,
thing.
Well, we had all the goats in our garden 2 days ago. My neighbor has goats and sheep, and they got out of the fence. A limb had fallen on his little electric fence. It waltzed, and they were all. And the whole herd was over in the garden.
Yeah,
which
you're
was-
not
it was all right.
far from just like full homesteading. It sounds like.
Well, I mean, yeah, we like growing some of the things we eat, especially things that are you can get that are not as good in the store. Obviously, if you can get to a fresh market where people are picking when stuff is coming in good, where they're picking every day. But then again, you got to go get it where we can just walk across
Just
the
walk
street and go.
outside. Back to the pride thing. It's a pride thing. You want to have a good looking yard. You
Yeah.
want to have a good looking garden.
And we enjoy. Again, you got to enjoy doing it to do it right because you're not going to give it the time.
But it's
if you
kind of
don't.
like I associate it to golf. If you're going to play golf, it can be enjoyable, but it's more enjoyable when you do it right.
Yes,
I can go out there and play a bad round of golf, and it's still fun, but I'm not having as much fun if I went out there and shot a 76.
sure.
Same thing with gardening. It can be fun, or tending to your yard. It can be fun, but it's not as much fun when it's a lot of weeds and my squash are dying and my tomatoes are curled up and stuff like
Absolutely.
that. When it's working and when I put the time into it and I do it right, that's when I really get the enjoyment and the benefits from it.
Oddly enough, I seem to give up on my yard before my golf game for some reason, even though I'm way more frustrated on the golf course.
So, I don't know. All right. Well, look, that's been some fantastic conversation. A lot to take in there, and just a bunch of good information. So, Robert, we appreciate your time. Look forward to having you back on another episode to talk about what you do when you're not in your yard or in your garden and some of that cool stuff. But look, lot going on here. We want photos of your garden. We want photos of your yard to feature on the episode. So you can email us at onthetailgate@wadeinc.com. If you got questions, you heard some things that interest you, and you got questions, want us to follow up with you, shoot us an email there as well. But outside of that, thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next time on The Tailgate.